The empty gallows cast long shadows across Promise Creek's town square in the pale light of dawn. James Blackwood's horse, lathered and heaving, had carried him through the night at a killing pace. But fate had outrun them both. The rough hemp rope still swayed gently in the morning breeze, a mockery of everything he held dear. Sarah, his beloved wife of 20 years, was gone, executed for crimes she never committed. The townspeople who gathered whispered and turned away, unable to meet his steel-hard gaze. But in their averted eyes he saw something more than shame. Fear that spoke of corruption reaching from the judge's chambers to the ruthless gang that had framed her. They thought justice was served. They thought this story was over. But a man with nothing left to lose is a dangerous thing. Could one rancher's relentless quest for truth unravel the very fabric of frontier justice? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Blackwood sat alone in his study, the oil lamp casting weak shadows across the mahogany desk where he'd spent countless evenings with Sarah. In his weathered hands, a simple gold band caught the flickering light. The inscription inside had worn thin from 20 years of daily wear. "My North Star, forever your James." Spring of 1855 felt like another lifetime now. He'd been 30 then, already established as one of Montana Territory's most promising ranchers, when Sarah Mitchell arrived on the afternoon stage from Boston. She wasn't like the other Eastern ladies who occasionally passed through Promise Creek, with their fancy dresses and obvious disdain for frontier life. Sarah stepped down from that dusty coach in a practical blue cotton dress, medical bag in hand, ready to serve as the town's new doctor. He still remembered the way she'd looked at him that first day, when he'd brought in one of his ranch hands with a nasty cut from a branding iron. Most women would have blanched at the sight, but Sarah had calmly cleaned and stitched the wound, her steady hands never faltering. "Mr. Blackwood," she'd said afterward, those intelligent green eyes meeting his, "you'll need to ensure he keeps that clean. I won't have my first patient in Promise Creek dying of infection." Their courtship had been as practical as she was at first. James would find reasons to ride into town. A worker with a sprained ankle, questions about storing medical supplies for the ranch, discussions about which herbs she might want to grow in the greenhouse he was building. Sarah saw through his excuses, but welcomed his visits anyway. They would talk for hours about everything and nothing, her dreams of bringing modern medicine to the frontier, his vision for making the ranch a cornerstone of the community, their shared belief that the West needed more than just law and order. It needed compassion and healing too. The proposal came during a spring thunderstorm. Sarah had ridden out to the ranch to tend to a colicky foal, refusing James's offer to wait until the weather cleared. They'd worked together through the night, her medical knowledge combining with his horse-breeding experience to save the animal. As dawn broke and the storm passed, they stood in the stable doorway, exhausted and mud-splattered. James had turned to her and said simply, "Marry me." Sarah's laugh had been like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I was wondering when you'd ask, Mr. Blackwood. I've had my answer ready for months." The wedding was small, but joyful, held in the town's newly built church. Sarah wore her mother's lace veil over that same practical blue dress, carrying wildflowers. James had gathered from the ranch's north pasture. When they exchanged rings, his hands trembled so badly that Sarah had to help him slip the band onto her finger. "Steady now," she'd whispered, eyes twinkling. "I've seen you calmer breaking wild stallions." Life settled into a rhythm after that. Sarah maintained her practice in town, but made the ranch her home, converting one of the outbuildings into a clinic for the ranch hands and their families. She planted an extensive herb garden, combining traditional remedies with her formal medical training. The greenhouse James built filled with healing plants, echinacea, yarrow, sage, and dozens more. Their dinner conversations were a peculiar mix of cattle prices and medical procedures, range management and herbal preparations. They tried for children in those early years, but it wasn't to be. Sarah's quiet grief found outlet in mothering the entire community instead. She delivered babies, tended injuries, fought fever epidemics, and taught basic medicine to isolated homesteaders. James watched his wife become the heart of Promise Creek, respected by even the gruffest old-timers who'd initially scoffed at a woman doctor. The ranch prospered under their joint care. James's innovative breeding programs and fair treatment of workers made Blackwood Ranch a model operation. Sarah's medical skills kept the workforce healthy and loyal. They were building something greater than themselves, a legacy of competence and compassion that would outlast them both. If only he'd known how short their time would be. If only he'd seen the shadows gathering, the jealousies and resentments festering among certain powerful men in town. If only he'd recognized that their very success made them targets. James turned the ring over in his hands, the gold smooth from years of wear. Sarah had kept it on through everything, through surgeries and cattle drives, through drought and blizzard, through every challenge they'd faced together. They'd taken it from her finger before the hanging. The thought burned like acid in his throat. His Sarah, who had saved so many lives, branded a murderer and thief. His healer-hearted wife, accused of plotting with stagecoach robbers, of using her rides to outlying homesteads as cover for scouting rich targets. The evidence had been a tapestry of lies, woven so skillfully that even now he couldn't see all the threads. But he would. He would unravel every false stitch, expose every corrupt hand that had moved against them. He slipped Sarah's ring onto a leather cord and tied it around his neck, close to his heart. Let it remind him of his purpose in the dark days ahead. "I'll make this right, my love," he whispered to the empty room. "I swear by everything we built together, I'll make them remember your name with honor." In the fading light, James found himself drawn to Sarah's greenhouse. The glass panes reflected the sunset like beaten copper, and inside, her herbs still grew with the same determined vitality she'd instilled in everything she touched. On her workbench lay her garden journal, its leather cover worn soft with use, pages swollen from pressed flowers, and countless notes written in her precise hand. April 15th, 1875, yarrow seedlings emerging strong. Planted new bed of fever few, needed after last winter's influenza outbreak. Must remember to save seeds for Mrs. Henderson's daughter. Her little one suffers terribly from fevers, and they're too proud to accept charity. We'll show her how to grow her own. The pages were filled with such observations, each entry revealing Sarah's quiet way of helping without seeming to help. James ran his fingers over the dried yarrow flowers pressed between the pages, remembering how she'd taught the ranch hands' wives to use them for treating wounds and reducing fevers. May 1st, 1875. Wild elderberry particularly abundant this spring. Made extra tincture for Judge Morrison's gout, though he grows increasingly short-tempered despite the medicine. His new friends worry me. Rough men with too much money and too few questions asked. Mentioned my concerns to James, but perhaps I'm being overcautious. James's hand tightened on the journal. She hadn't been overcautious at all. Those friends of Morrison's had been the first threads in the web that would eventually snare her. The Hawkins gang, they called themselves. Former Confederate raiders turned stagecoach robbers who'd somehow convinced the judge they could all get rich together. May 15th, 1875. Strange encounter on the trail to the Wilson place today. Two men I didn't recognize watching the road from the ridge. They rode off when they saw me, but something felt wrong. We'll take the valley route next time, though it's longer. Tom Wilson's wife is too close to her time for me to skip the visit entirely. Sarah had always put her patients first, even when her instincts warned her of danger. She'd continued her rounds to the outlying farms and ranches, carrying her medical bag and herbs to those too distant or too poor to reach town. Those same rounds would later be used against her, twisted into evidence of conspiracy. June 1st, 1875, planted moonflowers by the greenhouse door today. James teases me for being fanciful, but their night blooming reminds me of hope flowering in darkness. The ranch hands have been warning about increased bandit activity near the stage road. Must be cautious with my travels, but I can't abandon my patients. Young Mary Wilson delivered a healthy boy yesterday, worth every minute of the dangerous ride. The moonflowers still bloomed each evening, their white petals luminous in the gathering dark. Sarah had loved to sit among them in her rare moments of rest, planning her next day's rounds, or simply enjoying the peace of a job well done. June 10th, 1875. Expanded the herb beds again. James built new drying racks in the workshop, though I saw worry in his eyes. He's heard rumors about the stage robberies moving closer to Promise Creek. Judge Morrison was surprisingly interested in my travel schedule when I brought his medicine today. Said he was concerned for my safety, but his manner was odd. Must remember to vary my routes just in case. The last entry was dated June 15th, the day before her arrest. Silvery mountain sage ready for harvest. Its properties for healing grief seem particularly relevant lately. So much tension in town, so many worried faces. Even James is sleeping poorly, though he tries to hide it. I've advised several families to postpone trips until the bandit threat passes. Strange to think of our peaceful valley becoming dangerous, but change comes to all things. We must bend like the willow or break like the oak. Tomorrow I'll ride to the McPherson place. Their youngest has a cough. I don't like the sound. James wants to send a ranch hand with me, but that would only draw more attention. Sometimes the safest path is the quietest one. How wrong she'd been about that. The quiet path had led her straight into their trap. The McPhersons had been forced to testify that she'd never arrived for that appointment because she'd been arrested on the trail, charged with conspiring with the very bandits she'd been trying to avoid. James closed the journal gently, breathing in the lingering scent of dried herbs that clung to its pages. In the greenhouse, Sarah's healing plant still reached toward the light, ignorant that their tender had been taken. The feverfew and yarrow, the sage and elderberry, all still growing, still offering their medicine to anyone who knew how to use it. He tucked the journal inside his coat. Every entry was a testimony to her character, a record of her true nature that contradicted the lies they'd told about her. And there, hidden between those simple observations about plants and patients, were the clues she'd unknowingly recorded. The strange men watching the roads, the judge's suspicious questions, the growing atmosphere of tension and fear. The moonflowers were opening as he stepped outside, their white faces turned toward the rising moon. "You were right about hope flowering in darkness, my love," he whispered. "I'll make sure of it." The witness statement lay on James's desk like a viper coiled to strike. The paper had yellowed slightly in the month since Sarah's arrest, but the words remained as poisonous as the day they were written. "I, Theodore Wheeler, being of sound mind and body, do hereby swear that on the afternoon of June 12th, 1875, I witnessed Mrs. Sarah Blackwood in conversation with known members of the Hawkins gang near Devil's Creek Pass. She was showing them papers that appeared to be maps or schedules, and I distinctly heard discussion of the weekly bullion shipment route. When they noticed my presence, Mrs. Blackwood quickly mounted her horse and rode away, while the men made threatening gestures that caused me to flee. James had read the statement so many times he could recite it from memory. Every word, I lie, crafted with surgical precision to destroy Sarah's reputation and credibility. Wheeler, a drifter who'd been in Promise Creek barely 2 months, had vanished immediately after giving his testimony, but not before Judge Morrison had used his statement as the cornerstone of the case against Sarah. The day of her arrest played over and over in James's mind. He'd been in the south pasture discussing the fall cattle drive with his foreman when young Tommy Wilson rode up at a gallop. The boy's face had been white with shock. "Mr. Blackwood, they're arresting Miss Sarah. Marshall's men caught her on the trail to our place." James had never ridden so fast in his life, but by the time he reached town, they'd already locked her in a cell. Marshal Cooper, a man who'd broken bread at their table dozens of times, wouldn't meet his eyes. Got no choice, James. Judge's orders. Wheeler's testimony combined with the circumstantial evidence. It doesn't look good. Circumstantial evidence, James had roared. What evidence? Sarah's medical rounds? Her knowledge of the local trails? The fact that she travels the same roads the stages use? She's a doctor, for God's sake. But they'd had more than that. Someone had planted a money belt full of gold coins in her medical bag. Someone had forged letters in her handwriting, discussing stage schedules and guard rotations. Someone had carefully constructed a cage of false evidence around her, piece by interlocking piece. The trial was a mockery of justice. Judge Morrison, who'd once praised Sarah's gentle hands for easing his gout, now looked at her with manufactured disgust. Wheeler's testimony was read into record, but the man himself was unfortunately unavailable to be cross-examined. When Sarah tried to speak in her own defense, explaining her medical visits and showing her patient records, the judge had cut her off. The evidence speaks for itself, Mrs. Blackwood. Your position as a trusted member of this community made your betrayal all the more effective. You used your medical practice as a cover for criminal activities, exploiting the very people who trusted you most. James had hired the best lawyer in the territory, but even he seemed strangely reluctant to push too hard, to ask too many questions. It was only later that James learned the man's son had received a mysterious appointment to West Point, courtesy of Judge Morrison's connections. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When the foreman stood to deliver the verdict, his hands shook, but his voice was firm, guilty on all counts. Several of the jurors refused to make eye contact with either Sarah or James. He would later discover that each had been visited the night before by members of the Hawkins gang, their family's safety suddenly becoming a topic of conversation. Sarah had remained composed throughout, her quiet dignity a rebuke to the corrupt proceedings. Even when Morrison pronounced her sentence, death by hanging, she didn't break. Only when they were allowed a final meeting did she show her fear, not for herself but for James. "My love," she'd whispered through the cell bars, "don't let this destroy you. Don't let them take your soul along with my life." "I'll appeal," he'd promised desperately. "I'll take it to the governor himself." Sarah had smiled sadly. "There isn't time, and you know it. Morrison set the execution date specifically to prevent any appeal. Just remember me as I was. Remember our life together, and if you ever find the truth of this, let justice be tempered with mercy." That's what I would want. But there had been no mercy in her execution. Morrison had scheduled it for dawn, barely a week after the verdict. James had been forced to watch from the crowd as they led her to the gallows, her hair shining in the early light. She'd worn the blue dress from their wedding day, refusing the traditional black hood. Her last words were cut off as the trapdoor dropped. Now, staring at Wheeler's statement, James noticed something he'd missed before. The handwriting. There was something familiar about it. He pulled out a document from his desk, a court order bearing Morrison's signature and official notes. The flourishes on certain letters, the distinctive way the "th" was formed. It couldn't be. James laid the documents side by side, comparing each stroke and curve. Wheeler's statement hadn't just been a lie, it had been written in Morrison's own hand, then signed with Wheeler's name. The judge hadn't just accepted false testimony, he'd fabricated it himself. The revelation hit James like a physical blow. This wasn't just corruption, this was premeditation. Morrison had carefully crafted each piece of evidence, each step of the sham trial. The judge had murdered Sarah as surely as if he'd put the rope around her neck himself. James's hands trembled as he folded the statement and tucked it into his vest pocket alongside Sarah's journal. The first real piece of proof, the first thread that could start unraveling their entire conspiracy. Morrison's arrogance in using his own handwriting would be his undoing, but only if James could find a way to prove it. Only if he could stay alive long enough to expose the truth. He looked up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "I know you wanted mercy, my love," he whispered, But some crimes cry out for justice, and I aim to answer that cry. The courthouse janitor's hands shook as he handed over the small leather-bound book. Judge Morrison always locks it in his desk before leaving, Mr. Blackwood. But lately he's been getting careless, drinking more. Sometimes he forgets. James pressed a heavy coin into the man's palm. You're taking a risk, Samuel. I won't forget it. Miss Sarah, Samuel's voice cracked. She saved my Emma during the scarlet fever outbreak. Wouldn't take a penny for it, just made us promise to bring Emma to her for reading lessons. A woman like that. He straightened his stooped shoulders. You have 1 hour before his morning session begins. The judge's private ledger was a testament to ordered corruption. Morrison's precise handwriting laid out a network of bribes, payoffs, and threats spanning the last 3 years. Each entry was coded, but not cleverly enough to fool someone who'd spent decades managing ranch accounts. HG collection, 5,000, stage route 7, distribution, self, 2,000 deputies, 1,500 witnesses, 1,000 insurance, 500. The pattern repeated with variations, growing larger and more frequent. The Hawkins gang had started small, James realized, buying protection for minor heists. But their ambition had grown, along with Morrison's greed. The judge hadn't just been taking bribes. He'd been actively managing the operation, ensuring silence through strategic payments and threats. Then 3 months ago, a new pattern emerged. Blackwood problem. Urgent assets, 100,000 plus. Ranch, medical practice. Obstacles, local reputation. Legal resources. Potential witnesses. Solution. Wheeler testimony, evidence placement, expedited trial. Cost 15,000, committee payment, expected return 75,000 plus. James's vision blurred with rage. They'd murdered Sarah for profit, nothing more. Her reputation for traveling the territory had made her the perfect scapegoat for their robberies. Her execution would silence any questions about the gang's activities, while allowing Morrison to seize the ranch through legal fees and fines. But Morrison's methodical nature had betrayed him. The ledger listed names, dates, amounts, everything needed to unravel the conspiracy. Even the committee payment was broken down. 12 jurors at 1,000 each, plus 3,000 for the defense attorney's cooperation. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. James quickly copied the most damning entries into his notebook, including the page that detailed Sarah's frame-up. The original ledger had to stay. Morrison couldn't know it had been discovered. Not yet. He was returning the book to the judge's desk when a familiar voice echoed down the hall. Morrison, arriving early. James slipped behind the heavy office door just as the judge walked in. Accompanied by a rough-looking man James recognized as Luke Hawkins himself. Getting sloppy, Morrison, Hawkins growled. That Blackwood widower's been asking questions, making people nervous. Let him. Morrison's voice was whiskey rough. He has no proof, no standing. Even his fancy lawyer won't touch him now. One grieving husband's wild accusations against a respected judge. Who'd believe him? Better if he had an accident, like his wife should have, instead of that public hanging. No. Morrison's tone was sharp. No more deaths. The execution served its purpose, made everyone think justice was done. Another. Death would only raise questions. Let him dig. He'll find nothing but his own ruin. James stood motionless until they left, discussing details of their next robbery. Only then did he allow himself to breathe, Sarah's ring pressing against his chest where it hung on its leather cord. Found something after all, he whispered to her memory. And this is just the beginning. The telegram office was quiet in the pre-dawn hours. Jenny Miller, the night operator who'd known Sarah since childhood, let James in through the back door. Her face was drawn with worry as she pulled out a stack of yellow papers from a hidden compartment beneath her desk. I've been keeping copies, she whispered, glancing nervously at the door. Ever since Miss Sarah's arrest, the messages, they didn't make sense at first, but I kept them anyway. She treated my mother's consumption for 2 years, never asked for a penny. I knew she couldn't be guilty. The telegrams revealed a carefully coded correspondence between Morrison, the Hawkins gang, and various officials across 3 territories. Simple business phrases masked darker meanings. Cattle prices rising, stop. Expect delivery, Route 7 Thursday, stop. Weather favorable, stop. Jenny's hands trembled as she translated. Route 7 was hit that Thursday. Stage robbed. 2 guards killed. They were coordinating the attacks through official channels, right under our noses. James sorted through the papers, arranging them chronologically. The pattern emerged clearly now. Inquiries about shipment schedules disguised as commodity. Prices, gang movements coded as weather reports. Payoffs discussed as routine business transactions. But most damning were the messages surrounding Sarah's arrest. Doctor situation requires immediate attention. Stop prepare documents as discussed. Stop Wheeler arrives Tuesday. Stop. Evidence package delivered. Stop proceed with medical emergency. Stop. No delays. Stop. Treatment successful. Stop patient terminated. Stop proceed with property. Transfer. Stop. That last one had been sent the morning of Sarah's execution. James's jaw clenched as he read it, imagining Morrison's satisfaction as he'd composed those cold words. "There's more," Jenny said, her voice barely audible. The morning it happened. Miss Sarah asked to send a telegram. They let her, probably thinking it didn't matter anymore. I kept a copy of that one too." She handed him a final slip of paper, the message written in a different hand. Sarah's hand. "My dearest James, stop remember the moonflowers, stop truth. Like healing comes in its own time, stop all my love, always stop." James touched the paper gently, reading the words again and again. Even at the end, she'd been thinking of him, trying to give him comfort and guidance. The moonflowers she'd planted still bloomed each night, just as she'd known they would. "Jenny," he said quietly, "I need copies of all of these, and I need you to keep monitoring their messages. Can you do that safely?" She straightened in her chair. "They don't pay attention to me, just the invisible girl who works nights, sending their precious messages. I can do better than monitor them. I can start making mistakes. Little ones, just enough to disrupt their timing without raising suspicion. That's dangerous," James warned. "If they catch you—" "Miss Sarah risked everything to help people," Jenny interrupted. "She taught me to read when Mama couldn't. Avoid school fees. Said knowledge was the best medicine for poverty. I won't stand by while they destroy her name." A noise outside made them both freeze. Jenny quickly hid the original telegrams and handed James his copies. "Use the back door. I'll keep sending you updates through Samuel at the courthouse. He brings me coffee every night anyway. Nobody will notice." As James slipped out into the growing dawn, he felt a familiar ache in his chest. Sarah would have been proud of Jenny's courage, just as she'd been proud of all her former students. The young woman's loyalty was another piece of evidence, not for the courts, but for the truth of who Sarah had been. The telegrams in his coat pocket joined Morrison's coded ledger entries and the forged witness statement, pieces of a puzzle, slowly coming together. But James knew he'd need more than paper proof to bring down a corrupt judge and his network of killers. He'd need witnesses willing to talk, physical evidence of their crimes, and most importantly, he'd need to stay alive long enough to use it all. The letter arrived with the morning's ranch correspondence, unmarked except for his name written in crude block letters. Inside, the message was equally blunt. "Blackwood, your wife died quick. Clean break, over in seconds. Keep pushing, and you won't be so lucky. Imagine burning alive in your own barn. Imagine your loyal ranch hands finding pieces of you across 3 counties. Imagine everything you built turned to ashes while you watch, before we finally let you die. Some graves better left undisturbed. This is your only warning." The paper trembled slightly in James's hands, not from fear, but from a cold rage that had settled into his bones. They'd made a crucial mistake with this threat, revealed their mounting desperation. 2 days earlier, Jenny's careful monitoring had intercepted a telegram. "Widower gathering evidence. Stop situation. Requires immediate action. Stop await instructions. Stop. Now he had those instructions in his hands. The Hawkins gang wasn't used to victims who fought back. Their power came from fear, from the belief that resistance was futile. Sarah's framing and execution had been meant to reinforce that lesson. See what happens to even the most respected citizen who crosses us. But they'd miscalculated. Killing Sarah hadn't cowed James into submission. It had removed the only thing they could have threatened him with. He had nothing left to lose, and that made him more dangerous than any gunslinger. The sound of approaching hooves drew his attention. Through the window he saw 3 of his most trusted hands riding in hard, their faces grim. Tom, his foreman, practically leaped from his horse. Mr. Blackwood, the North Pasture. They shot up the place, killed 4 of our best breeding bulls, left this nailed to the fence. The second letter was shorter. Next time it's your men. James read it twice, his voice steady as he asked, "Anyone hurt?" "No, sir. Young Billy saw them riding in and got everyone under cover." But Mr. Blackwood, it was the marshal's deputies who did it, wore badges bold as brass while they murdered our stock. Of course, Morrison was escalating, using official authority to carry out his threats. The deputies would claim they were investigating suspicious activities at the ranch, their vandalism dismissed as necessary law enforcement. "Tom," James said quietly, "get word to all the hands. Anyone who wants to leave can leave. No hard feelings. I won't risk men's lives. For my fight." The foreman's weathered face hardened. "Already talked it over with the boys. Miss Sarah doctored our families, delivered our babies, taught our kids to read. She made this ranch more than just a job, made it a community. We're staying." The other hands nodded firmly. James looked at these men he'd worked beside for years, saw the same cold determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. The threats hadn't weakened his resolve. They'd given him allies. "All right then," he said, "but we do this smart. Double the night watches, nobody rides alone, and send our families to the Hopkins place up north. Kate Hopkins was Sarah's best friend. She'll take them in until this is over." "Already suggested it to the wives," Tom agreed. "They're packing now. But, sir, what's our next move?" James laid the letters side by side on his desk, studying the crude threats that revealed so much about their writers. They're scared. These aren't the actions of men in control. They're the tactics of men who feel their power slipping. Morrison's getting reckless, the gang's getting obvious, and every mistake they make. He pulled out his growing file of evidence. Morrison's ledger entries, Jenny's telegram copies, Wheeler's forged statement. Now these letters, proof of intimidation by law enforcement. The pieces were coming together, but he still needed something concrete, something that would break the conspiracy wide open. "Tom," he said finally, "how'd you like to help me rob?" "A bank?" The foreman's eyes widened, then narrowed thoughtfully. "The same bank where Morrison keeps his accounts?" James smiled grimly. "Sarah always said the best medicine was preventing the disease. Time we cut off their money supply at the source." The marshal's badge lay tarnished on James's desk, its silver star dulled by years of compromise. Marshal Cooper had dropped it there himself, his shoulders sagging with the weight of confession. "I didn't want any part of Sarah's death," Cooper said hoarsely. "Morrison just wanted us to look the other way on the stage robberies at first. Take our cut, keep quiet. Then it grew. Every time we compromised, they asked for more. By the time they moved against Sarah, we were in too deep." James studied the man he'd once called friend, seeing how corruption had aged him. "But you did it anyway. Arrested her on false charges, kept me from seeing her, rushed the execution. Morrison had proof about the robberies we'd ignored. Said if any of us broke ranks, he'd make sure we hung right beside the Hawkins gang." Cooper's hands shook as he poured himself a drink. "I'm not proud, James. Been sick with it ever since. That's why I came tonight, to warn you about the bank." James kept his face carefully neutral. "The bank? Don't play fool. My deputies saw your men scouting the place. Morrison's got a trap laid. The moment you try anything, they'll gun you down. Call it resisting arrest or caught in the act of robbery. Either way, you'll be just as dead as—" He stopped, unable to say Sarah's name. "Interesting theory," James said coldly. "But what makes you think I'm planning anything illegal? I'm just a grieving widower, remember? No proof, no standing. Isn't that what Morrison says?" Cooper leaned forward intently. "Listen to me. Morrison's scared. The evidence you're gathering, the witnesses you're finding, it's making him desperate. Man like that, backed into a corner, he'll burn everything down rather than face justice." "Like you did?" James fingered the badge. "Tell me, John, how much was Sarah's life worth? What was your cut of the blood money?" "I'm trying to help you, damn it!" Cooper slammed his glass down. "I can't change what I did, but I can stop you from throwing your life away on revenge." "Not revenge, justice." James stood slowly. "And you're going to help me get it?" Cooper barked a harsh laugh. "By doing what? Testifying, admitting my own guilt? By doing exactly what Morrison expects." James pulled out a carefully folded document. "Tomorrow morning, you'll sign an order authorizing the transfer of all evidence from Sarah's case to the territorial capital for review. Standard procedure, nothing suspicious. While Morrison's men are watching the bank, expecting an amateur robbery attempt, my hands will be loading every document, every exhibit, every piece of manufactured evidence onto a wagon, legally under armed escort. He'll never fall for it. He will because you're going to tell him about my bank plan yourself. Play your part, John. Let him think you're still his loyal dog. Meanwhile, I'll have what I really need, access to the evidence that will prove Sarah was framed." Cooper stared at him for a long moment. "You've changed, James. The man I knew wouldn't manipulate people like this. The man you knew died with his wife." James picked up the tarnished badge, turning it so it caught the lamplight. "The question is, who are you now? The man who helps cover up one more murder, or the one who finally stands for something?" Silence stretched between them. Finally, Cooper reached for the badge with trembling fingers. "What you're planning, it won't bring her back." "No," James agreed quietly, "but it might save the next innocent person Morrison decides to sacrifice. Sarah would want that." Cooper pinned the badge back on, its weight visibly heavy on his chest. "I'll sign your transfer order. But James, be careful. Morrison has men everywhere. One wrong move—" "I've already made my peace with dying," James said. "The only question is how many of them I take down first." He held up a hand as Cooper started to protest. "Don't worry, old friend. Sarah wouldn't want revenge. She'd want the truth exposed, the corruption ended. That's what I aim to do, even if it costs my life." As Cooper left through the back door, James watched him mount up and ride away. One more piece moved into position. Tomorrow would tell if his gambit would work or if he'd just signed his own death warrant. Either way, there was no turning back now. The bank records covered James's study floor like fallen leaves, each page telling its part of a poisonous story. Harold Webber, the bank's elderly bookkeeper, knelt beside him, pointing out connections with arthritic fingers. "See here, Morrison opened these accounts under different names, but the deposit patterns are identical. Money comes in from the staged robberies, gets laundered through legitimate businesses, then flows out to all the conspirators." The old man's voice shook with anger. "Been watching it happen for years, too scared to speak up. But after what they did to Sarah—" James studied the complex web of transactions. Morrison had been clever, using multiple accounts and businesses to hide the money trail, but Webber's meticulous bookkeeping had captured every detail. Deposit, amounts, dates, transfer patterns. The judge's greed had finally outdone his caution. "This account here," Webber tapped a ledger page, "belongs to a dry goods store that burned down 2 years ago, but it's still receiving regular deposits, all in multiples of $1,000 amounts. And this one," he flipped to another page, "is supposedly a widow's inheritance trust. Except the widow died last winter, and the account's more active than ever." James traced the money flows, seeing how they connected to dates in Morrison's private ledger. The stage robberies. Each major deposit matches a heist. They weren't just stealing gold and cash. They were investing it, building a financial empire. "Exactly," Weber pulled out more records, but Sarah's execution changed something. Look at the withdrawal patterns this past month. They're pulling money out, converting assets to cash. Morrison's preparing to run. The evidence was clear in the numbers. Large accounts being drained, properties being sold through strawman buyers, investments liquidated at losses that suggested desperate haste. Morrison wasn't just scared of exposure, he was actively planning his escape. "How much time do we have?" James asked. Weber shuffled through papers covered in calculations. "Based on these transactions, 2 weeks, maybe less. Once they've converted everything to portable assets, they'll vanish. Morrison's already bought passage on a steamer to Panama, through a proxy, of course. Then we move now." James began gathering the most damning records. "I need copies of all of this. Proof of every transaction, every account, every connection. To the robberies and murders. Already prepared." Weber pulled a thick envelope from his coat. "Been making duplicate entries for months. Ever since they started pressuring me to falsify records. Kept one set in my sister's house in the next town. After Sarah," he paused, swallowing hard. "After what happened, I knew somebody would need this evidence eventually." James gripped the old man's shoulder. "You're taking a huge risk." "I'm dying anyway," Weber said matter-of-factly. "Consumption. Won't see out the year, but I taught Sarah bookkeeping when she first arrived, helped her set up her medical practice accounts. She used to bring me willow bark tea for my joints. Sit and talk about her dreams for the town." His rheumy eyes hardened. "I won't let them escape justice. Not after what they did to her. And they'll know it was you who helped me." Weber smiled grimly. "I've already sent my grandchildren to live with their aunt in Denver. As for me," he patted his chest, where James knew he kept a small Derringer pistol, "I may be old and sick, but I can still aim straight enough to take 1 or 2 of them with me if they come." James carefully sorted through the copies, organizing them to support his other evidence. The bank records were the skeleton key that would unlock everything. Proof of laundered robbery proceeds, bribes to officials, payoffs to false witnesses. Even Sarah's frame-up could be traced through suspicious transactions. Money to Wheeler's account, payments to jurors, the judge's suddenly flourishing finances. "One more thing," Weber said, pulling out a final document. "Morrison's been buying property around your ranch through shell companies. Once you were dead or ruined, he'd have controlled the whole valley. Sarah's murder wasn't just about silencing a threat, it was part of a bigger land grab." James stared at the property maps, seeing for the first time the full scope of Morrison's ambitions. The judge hadn't just corrupted justice, he'd planned to build an empire on the bones of honest people. "Thank you," he told Weber quietly. "Sarah would be proud of your courage." "Just promise me one thing," the old man said. "When you take them down, make it public. Let everyone see exactly who and what they really are." James carefully packed the precious records into his saddlebags. "Oh, don't worry. By the time I'm done, there won't be a soul in 3 territories who doesn't know the truth." The letter had been waiting for him all this time, sealed in an envelope in Sarah's medical bag. The prison matron had finally brought it to him, her own eyes wet with tears. "She wrote it the night before the end, made me promise not to give it to you until you'd had time to grieve properly." James sat in Sarah's greenhouse, surrounded by the herbs she'd tended so carefully, and broke the seal with trembling hands. "My dearest James, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Know that my last thoughts were of you, of our life together, of all the joy and purpose you brought to my days. 20 years of love. That's more than many people ever get. I try to hold on to that truth in these dark hours. I know you, my love. Know the guilt you're carrying, the rage burning in your heart. You're telling yourself you should have seen it coming, should have protected me better, should have found a way to stop this. Let go of those thoughts. They did not win because you failed. They won because they were willing to corrupt everything decent and honest to achieve their ends. What's happening to me isn't justice. We both know that. But James, whatever you do next, remember that justice isn't the same as vengeance. The difference matters, love. It matters more than anything. You're going to find evidence of their crimes, going to uncover every rotten thing they've done. When you do, use the law they've corrupted to bring them down. Make them face true justice. In the light of day. Don't let them turn you into what they are, men who think the end justifies any means. I've been thinking about the moonflowers we planted together. Remember how you teased me for wanting flowers that only bloom at night? But that was the point, wasn't it? Even in darkness, something beautiful can flower. Even in shadow, life finds a way to shine. Be my moonflower, James. Let whatever you do in my name bring light to others, not more darkness. The truth about what they've done needs to come out, yes, but not just to punish them, to prevent them from hurting anyone else, to restore people's faith that justice is still possible. I know you're hurting. No, you may never fully heal from this wound, but you're stronger than the pain, love, stronger than the hatred they want to plant in your heart. I've watched you build our ranch from nothing, watched you lead men through blizzards and droughts, watched you face every challenge with that quiet determination that made me fall in love with you. Use that strength now, not for revenge, but for restoration. Make my death mean something by using it to protect others from these men. Show everyone that truth and justice can still triumph over corruption and greed. I'm not afraid, James. Whatever lies beyond this life, I'll face it knowing I lived with honor and loved with my whole heart. My only regret is the pain this will cause you. But you still have work to do in this world, important work, work that will determine whether my death becomes a victory for corruption or a catalyst for change. Remember the day you proposed to me. We just saved that foal together, worked through the night in perfect partnership. That's who you are, a builder, a healer in your own way. Don't let them turn you into a destroyer. I love you, James Blackwood. Love the man you are, the man you'll continue to be even after I'm gone. Carry that love with you, let it guide your actions, and when the darkness feels overwhelming, look to the moonflowers. They'll remind you that light can bloom in the darkest night. All my love, always, Sarah. James pressed the letter to his chest, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. For the first time since her death, he let himself fully feel the loss, the rage, the bottomless grief. The greenhouse filled with the sweet scent of Sarah's herbs as darkness fell and the moonflowers began to open, their white petals glowing in the gathering dusk. When he finally looked up, his face was wet, but his eyes were clear. Sarah was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making her death matter, about using it to expose the corruption that had killed her and threatened the entire territory. He carefully folded the letter and placed it in his coat next to his heart. I understand now, love, he whispered. Justice, not vengeance. Light, not darkness. I'll make this right, I swear. Not just for you, for everyone they've hurt, everyone they might hurt in the future. The moonflowers nodded gently in the evening breeze, their fragrance filling the air with Sarah's last, most precious gift. Purpose. The leather-bound ledger had been hidden inside Judge Morrison's law books, its spine carefully relabeled to read Property Statutes Volume 3. But Samuel the janitor, methodically searching the judge's office while cleaning late at night, had noticed something odd. This book gathered no dust. Morrison handled it too often, always returning it to the exact same spot. Now, in the safe confines of James's study, its pages revealed a truth far darker than anyone had imagined. This wasn't just a record of bribes and stolen gold. This was the master key to a decade of calculated murders, all disguised as legal executions. My God, Tom whispered, looking over James's shoulder. Sarah wasn't the first. The entries stretched back 10 years, each one meticulously detailed. 1865, David Chen, merchant. Discovered opium smuggling operation. Refused partnership offer. Convicted of murder, arranged. Estate seized, $12,000 value. To 67, Margaret Wells, widow. Land needed for railroad deal. Rejected purchase offer. Convicted of poisoning deceased husband, arranged. Property acquired through auction, $8,000 value. 1869, Thomas Burke, rancher. Water rights dispute, wouldn't sell, convicted of cattle rustling, arranged. Ranch acquired through legal fees, $25,000 value. The list went on, page after blood-soaked page. Morrison had turned the court into his personal weapon, using it to eliminate anyone who stood in the way of his ambitions. Each entry included names of paid witnesses, corrupted jurors, even the specific evidence manufactured for each case. "Here's Sarah's entry," James said hoarsely, pointing to a recent page. 1875, Sarah Blackwood, doctor, suspicious of stage robbery pattern, extensive community connections, risk exposure. Additional factor, property acquisition plan requires removal of both Blackwoods. Conviction for robbery conspiracy arranged. Husband expected to pursue vigilante justice, providing pretext for elimination. Note, expedited execution essential. Subject's medical knowledge and community standing create risk of case review. Witness Wheeler prepared and dispatched. Evidence. Planted per usual method. Total expected returns after both eliminations, 100,000 plus. But it was the entry immediately after Sarah's that made James's blood run cold. Urgent update. Blackwood investigation exceeding expectations. Subject displaying systematic approach, gathering concrete evidence. Multiple secure sources compromised. Primary ledger at risk. Emergency protocol. Initiated. Accelerate property liquidation. Eliminate key witnesses. Weber, Cooper, Miller girl. Stage accident at Blackwood Ranch. Activate territorial contacts for immediate departure. Note. Similar resistance encountered in Prescott, 1871, and Silver City, 1873. Both resolved through comprehensive elimination of target support network before primary elimination. See attached lists for current priority targets. James's hands trembled as he turned to the attached pages. There they were. Names of everyone who'd helped him, everyone who'd shown loyalty to Sarah's memory. Weber, the bookkeeper, Jenny Miller, the telegraph operator, Samuel, the janitor, Cooper, the conflicted marshal, even Tom and the other ranch hands. Morrison had marked them all for death, but the ledger held one final devastating revelation. A yellowed telegram tucked into the back pages, dated just 2 days before Sarah's arrest. Dr. Blackwood. Stop concerns about stage robberies verified. Stop evidence located in cave north of Wilson property. Stop require immediate assistance. To document stop. James stared at the message, understanding hitting him like a physical blow. She found it. Sarah actually found their cache of stolen gold. That's why they moved so fast, why they couldn't risk a normal trial. Tom leaned in, squinting at the telegram. The cave north of Wilson's, that's Devil's Kiss Cave. 10 miles of tunnels in those hills. They could have hidden a fortune in there, and Sarah discovered it while making her rounds. James traced the telegram's words. She wasn't just an obstacle to Morrison's land grab. She'd found physical proof of their crimes. But if the gold's still there, Morrison can't leave it behind, not that much wealth. James stood abruptly, mind racing. That's what they're planning. All these property sales, the preparations. For running, it's cover for their real escape. They'll clear out the cave, make it look like a last robbery by the Hawkins gang. By the time anyone realizes Morrison is gone, the evidence would be gone too, Tom finished. No gold, no proof of any crimes, just the word of a grieving widower against a respected judge who retired to Panama. James spread out a map of the territory, his finger tracing the route to Devil's Kiss Cave. How long to get the men ready? Hour, maybe less. But Mr. Blackwood, that cave's a natural fortress. They'll be expecting someone to figure this out eventually, probably have it guarded. Good. James carefully folded Sarah's telegram and placed it in his vest pocket next to her last letter. Because I'm counting on it. Morrison's ledger shows exactly how he thinks, how he plans. He's used the same strategy for years. Eliminate the target's supporters first, then strike. But this time, he pulled out fresh paper, began writing quickly. This time we know his plan. Know about the cave, the escape route, the planned accidents. Knowledge is power, Tom. Sarah taught me that. And thanks to her last discovery, we can finally turn Morrison's own methods against him. Tom studied his employer's face. What are you thinking? Morrison expects me to react like his previous victims, either run away or die trying for revenge. Instead, we're going to give him exactly what he wants, a chance to eliminate all his problems at once. You're going to bait a trap. No. James kept writing, his pen scratching across the paper. I'm going to let him think he's baiting one. He'll expect us to try for the cave, so that's what we'll seem to do. But while he's busy surviving our attack, we'll be somewhere else entirely. Tom said slowly, beginning to understand. Sarah believed in justice, not vengeance. Told me so in her last letter. James sealed the messages he'd written, handed them to his foreman. Get these to Weber, Jenny, and Cooper. Tell them exactly when and how to deliver them. Everything has to happen in the right order. And the men, split them into 2 groups. I want plenty of noise and movement heading toward Devil's Kiss Cave. Make it obvious, like we're trying to be stealthy and failing. While you do what? James picked up Morrison's secret ledger, its pages heavy with evidence of decades of judicial murder. While I deliver justice in broad daylight, right in the middle of town. Sometimes, Tom, the best way to catch a snake is to make him think he's the one doing the hunting. As his foreman rode out to set things in motion, James reread Sarah's telegram one last time. Even in death, she was still helping him, still showing him the path to truth. Morrison had killed her to protect his secrets, but her last discovery would be his undoing. You were right about the moonflowers, love, he whispered. Light always finds a way to bloom in darkness, even if it takes 10 years of shadows to reveal it. The contracts lay spread across the scarred table in the back room of Weber's shop, each one a promise written in steel-trap legal language. James watched as the signers stepped forward one by one, their faces grim with purpose. By witnessing this document, Weber read aloud, his bookkeeper's voice precise. I swear to the truthfulness of my testimony regarding judicial corruption, extortion, and murder perpetrated by Judge Theodore Morrison and his associates. I understand the risks and accept them freely, binding myself to stand with my fellow witnesses until justice is served. Jenny Miller signed first, her normally delicate handwriting bold and clear. For Miss Sarah, she said quietly, adding, her testimony about the coded telegrams as an attached affidavit. Marshal Cooper came next, his badge conspicuously absent. His detailed account of coerced testimony and fabricated evidence filled 3 pages. Should have done this years ago, he muttered, the pen shaking slightly in his hand. Samuel added his observations from years of cleaning Morrison's office, including dates and details of suspicious meetings. The Wilson family documented Sarah's final intended house call, proving she couldn't have been at Devil's Creek Pass, as Wheeler had claimed. One by one they came forward. Shopkeepers who'd been extorted, ranchers who'd faced mysterious property disputes, widows and orphans who'd lost their land through suddenly discovered tax problems. Each had been afraid to speak alone, but together. 37 witnesses, Weber announced finally. All sworn and signed, with copies distributed to 5 separate secure locations. Even if they strike at some of us, the truth will still come out. James studied the stack of contracts, each one representing a life Morrison had damaged. A piece of the corrupt puzzle. You all understand the danger? Once we move, there's no turning back. We understood the danger when we signed, Jenny said firmly. That's why we insisted on the binding language. No one can back out now without exposing themselves to legal consequences. It had been her idea, that crucial detail, make their commitment to justice stronger than their fear of Morrison by binding them legally to their testimony. The contracts didn't just document Morrison's crimes, they made each signer an official witness, with copies filed secretly with territorial authorities. Marshal Cooper's men are positioned? James asked. Cooper nodded. The honest ones, yes. 6 deputies I trust stationed near each witness's home. The rest, he grimaced, the rest are watching Devil's Kiss Cave, just like Morrison ordered. Add them too. Perfect. James gathered the contracts carefully. Weber, you have the bank records ready. The old bookkeeper patted his coat pocket. All matched to dates and amounts in Morrison's ledger. Shows exactly how the stolen money flowed through his accounts. Jenny. Telegrams decoded and organized. I can prove the whole communication network, and the night operator in Prescott sent confirmation. He has records of similar patterns there, just like Morrison's ledger mentioned. James felt Sarah's ring against his chest, its familiar weight reassuring. She would have appreciated this, fighting corruption not with violence, but with paperwork, using the law itself to protect those brave enough to stand against its abuse. 2 days, he said quietly. Morrison's men will be watching the cave, expecting us to make our move. Instead, every witness will be in place, ready to present their evidence in open court. Judge Richardson arrives from the territorial capital tomorrow night. Morrison will try to stop us, Cooper warned. Men like him, they'd rather burn everything. Down than face justice. Let him try. James handed each person a copy of their contract, their sworn testimony, their proof of Morrison's crimes. That's why we're not hiding. Evil like his grows in shadow. We're dragging it into the light. As the witnesses filed out, each carrying their piece of the truth, James remembered Sarah's words about the moonflowers. Light blooming in darkness. Justice growing in corruption's shadow. She would have been proud of these people, standing together against fear. Weber was the last to leave, pausing at the door. You know, in all my years keeping books, I've never seen accounts balance quite as perfectly as this. Morrison's ledger lists every crime, every victim. And now, each victim's testimony will help convict him for what he did to Sarah. Poetic. Justice, James said softly. More than that. Weber smiled grimly. It's the kind of justice she believed in. Not revenge, not violence, just the truth, finally coming to light. As James rode home through the gathering dusk, he saw moonflowers opening in gardens across town. Tomorrow, Morrison would be watching the cave, waiting for an attack that would never come. Instead, justice would bloom in the last place he expected. Right, in the middle of his own courtroom, delivered by the very people he'd thought too afraid to stand against him. Sarah would have liked that. The confession was written in a cramped, unsteady hand, ink blotched by nervous sweat. Luke Hawkins hadn't wanted to write it, but a bullet in his leg and the long drop from Devil's Kiss Cave had changed his mind. Now he sat propped against a boulder, Marshal Cooper's deputies keeping watch, while James read the damning words. I, Luke Hawkins, being of sound mind, do hereby confess to my role in the false prosecution and wrongful execution of Sarah Blackwood. Judge Morrison hired our gang in '73 to run his protection scheme. Stagecoach robberies were just the start. He had us threaten witnesses, plant evidence, even kill when necessary. We thought we were using him, but he was using us. Sarah Blackwood was different. Morrison was scared of her, said she was asking questions about the robberies, treating patients who'd seen things they shouldn't. When she found our cave, he didn't just want her silenced, he wanted her destroyed publicly. Make an example. Wheeler wasn't real. Morrison created him, wrote his testimony himself. We planted the money in her medical bag, forged the letters. I personally threatened 3 jurors' families. Morrison had it all planned, down to the timing of her execution, to prevent appeals. The judge is planning something big. He's been moving gold out of the cave all week, talking about ships and Panama, but he means to kill everyone who helped him first. Says dead men can't testify. Got a list of names. The telegraph girl, the old bookkeeper, the banker, even Cooper. Saving Blackwood for last. Wants him to see it all fall apart before he dies. I write this freely, knowing it may send me to the gallows. Better a quick drop than what Morrison has planned. He's mad now, seeing threats everywhere. Won't leave any loose ends when he runs. Everything in Morrison's secret ledger is true. I've seen it myself, helped him plan some of it. 10 years of murdered innocence, all to build his empire. Sarah. Blackwood was just the latest, but she won't be the last if he isn't stopped. The gold's hidden in false walls behind the judge's library. Maps to our other caches are in a strongbox under his desk. He's got papers proving everything. Loves writing it all down, like he's proud of how clever he is. I know this confession won't save me, don't want it to. Just want the truth known before Morrison kills everyone who knows it. The signature at the bottom was shaky, but legible, witnessed by Cooper and 2 deputies. James folded the pages carefully, adding them to his growing collection of evidence. "He tried running," Cooper explained, gesturing at Hawkins's bloody leg. "My men caught him moving gold from the cave, shot him before they realized who he was. Once he understood Morrison meant to kill him anyway. Man like that, survival matters more than loyalty," James said quietly. He turned to Hawkins. "Sarah treated your younger brother once, didn't she? For typhoid." The outlaw's face twisted. 2 weeks of care wouldn't take a penny. Said she couldn't let a boy die just 'cause his brother was wrongin'. I remembered that when Morrison made us plant the evidence. Tried telling myself it was just business, but he looked away. "Reckon I'll have time to think about it plenty before they hang me." "Assuming Morrison doesn't reach you first," James said. "Your confession's worthless if you're dead before the hearing." "Judge Richardson's coach arrives at midnight," Cooper added. "Morrison will know his time's running out. If he thinks you've turned—" Hawkins laughed bitterly. "Oh, he knows. That's why most of my gang's dead already. Found them this morning, throats cut in their sleep. Morrison's got new men now, real killers. They'll come for me, then the witnesses." Then a shot cracked across the valley. One of Cooper's deputies fell, blood blooming on his chest. "Get down!" Cooper dragged Hawkins behind a boulder as more shots rang out. "They're in the rocks above us!" James drew his revolver, scanning the ridgeline. "Morrison's not waiting for dark. He's starting his purge now." "Get the confession out," Hawkins gasped, pressing a hand to his wounded leg. "I'll hold their attention here. Least I can do after what we did to her." James hesitated. Only a moment before nodding, Sarah's voice seemed to whisper in his mind. Justice, not vengeance. Truth, not bloodshed. "Cooper, get your men back to town. Guard the witnesses. I'll take the confession to Judge Richardson myself." "And Hawkins?" James met the outlaw's eyes. "Your testimony in person would be better than words on paper." Hawkins nodded slowly. "Reckon I've run long enough. Get me to that courtroom alive. I'll tell everything I know." More shots kicked up dust around them. Time was running out. Morrison's final plan was in motion, but so was James's. The question was, which of them would reach their goal first? The court summons crackled in Morrison's hands as he read it aloud, his voice sharp with disbelief. "An emergency session of the Territorial Court, the Honorable Judge William Richardson presiding, is hereby convened to review evidence of judicial misconduct and criminal conspiracy in the matter of Sarah Blackwood's execution. All named parties are required to appear under penalty of law." The courthouse was packed, every bench filled with townsfolk. James sat in the front row, Sarah's ring heavy against his chest, watching Morrison's facade of control crack slightly. Around the edges. The judge hadn't expected this, a legal challenge in his own courtroom, backed by a superior court justice. "This is irregular," Morrison sputtered, looking from the summons to Judge Richardson's stern face. "I have a full docket today. Important cases, more important than evidence of an innocent woman wrongly hanged." Richardson's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. "The territorial governor himself authorized this hearing upon receipt of certain documents, unless you object to reviewing the facts of the case, Judge Morrison." James watched Morrison's mind working behind his careful mask. The judge was counting angles, measuring risks. His men were still watching Devil's Kiss Cave, expecting an attack there. He couldn't know how many witnesses were ready to testify, how much evidence had been gathered. "Of course not," Morrison said smoothly. "Though I fail to see what new evidence could possibly exist. The Blackwood case was resolved months ago, all appeals exhausted. There were no appeals, James said quietly, standing. You made sure of that by rushing the execution. Morrison's eyes flickered to the doors, where armed deputies, Cooper's loyal men, not his corrupted ones, stood guard. No escape there. His gaze swept the crowd, perhaps looking for his hired killers, but James had made sure they were thoroughly occupied elsewhere. Mr. Blackwood, Morrison's voice dripped false sympathy. I understand your grief, but this theatrical display won't bring your wife back. No, James agreed, but it might bring her justice. He nodded to Weber, who began distributing copies of the bank records to Richardson and the court clerk. Let's start with your financial records, Judge, specifically the payments you received before and after each of your special cases. Morrison's face hardened. I don't answer to you, answer to me, Richardson cut in, and to the territorial court. These records show substantial, suspicious deposits following multiple executions over the past decade. Care to explain? Circumstantial, Morrison snapped, and likely forged. I've never seen these documents before. No? Jenny Miller stood, holding up a stack of telegrams. Then perhaps you'd like to explain these communications with the Hawkins gang. I kept copies of every message, Judge, including the ones about Sarah Blackwood. The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Morrison's hand twitched toward his coat, where James knew he kept a derringer, but with Cooper's men watching, he didn't dare draw. Hearsay and fabrications, Morrison declared, from unreliable witnesses who you planned to murder. James pulled out Hawkins's confession. Your former associate was quite detailed about your plans. About all of it, actually. The fake witness Wheeler, the planted evidence, the threatened jurors. He's waiting outside under guard, ready to testify. Morrison's mask slipped further, showing the first real flash of fear. Hawkins is a criminal, a murderer. His word means nothing. Then how about your own words? James produced the secret ledger, found behind your law books, detailed records of every person you've murdered through false justice, including your plans for Sarah and for eliminating everyone who helped expose your crimes. The courthouse had gone deathly quiet. Morrison's face had turned grey as James handed the ledger to Judge Richardson. The older justice began reading, his expression growing grimmer with each page. My God, Richardson breathed. The Prescott cases, Silver City, it's all here. Every murder, every theft, every corruption of justice. Morrison stood abruptly. This is absurd. I am a respected judge of this territory. You can't possibly— Respect is earned through justice, Richardson said coldly, not purchased through murder. Marshal Cooper, take Judge Morrison into custody. The evidence warrants immediate— The sound of gunfire erupted from outside. Morrison smiled thinly. It seems my men have finally realized your little trap at the cave was a diversion. They'll be here soon, and then we'll see what evidence survives. But James was smiling too. Actually, Judge, they're a bit occupied at the moment. See, we learned from Sarah's death. The law may be slow, but it doesn't have to be weak. While you were watching the cave, Deputy Marshal Hayes and a full company of territorial rangers were surrounding Promise Creek. Your killers are already surrendering. The color drained from Morrison's face as he realized the truth. There would be no escape, no final act of violence to cover his crimes. Justice had finally caught up with him in the very courtroom where he had perverted it for so long. Morrison's confession flowed like poison from a lanced wound, each word dragged out by the weight of overwhelming evidence and the inexorable pressure of justice long delayed. Yes, he spat, his composure finally shattered. Yes, I had her killed. Sarah Blackwood was a threat to everything I'd built. Do you have any idea how long it took to create this network? How carefully I constructed each piece? Then this frontier doctor starts asking questions, treating patients who'd seen too much, connecting dots that should have stayed disconnected. The courthouse grew deathly still as Morrison's bitter words echoed off the high ceiling. Judge Richardson, leaned forward, his face stern. Continue. She was too respected to simply disappear, too well known for a convenient accident. It had to be legal, public, devastating. A respected citizen revealed as a secret criminal. It would silence anyone else who might start asking questions. Morrison's laugh was hollow. The perfect solution. Use the law itself to destroy someone who believed in justice. James sat, rigid in his chair, Sarah's ring pressed against his heart as Morrison detailed every calculated step. The forged evidence, the threatened witnesses, the corrupted jury, the rushed execution. The judge's precise memory for detail, once used to track his crimes, now condemned him with every word. And I would have succeeded completely, Morrison continued, bitterness dripping from every word, if her husband had just broken like the others, grieved and drunk himself to death, or tried something foolishly violent that would justify killing him. Instead, he glared at James, instead you built a case, gathered evidence, used the very legal system I had corrupted to trap me. Sarah would be proud. Don't say her name, James said quietly. You've stained enough with that mouth. Morrison ignored him, warming to his confession now that all was lost. You want to know the real irony? She actually found our gold cache by accident, was treating some farmer's sick child, took a wrong turn in the cave system while gathering herbs that grew there. She didn't even realize what she'd found at first. Sent that telegram asking for help documenting evidence of the robberies because she thought it would help stop the violence. Such a healer's way of thinking. Find the disease, cure the patient. So, you killed her, Judge Richardson said heavily. An innocent woman murdered to protect your crimes. Innocent, Morrison's face twisted. She was guilty of the worst crime of all, believing in justice, believing the law served truth rather than power. I proved her wrong about that, didn't I? Used her own faith in justice to destroy her. James stood slowly. No. You proved her. Right? Morrison blinked. What? Sarah believed justice would prevail in the end. That truth couldn't stay buried forever. That light would bloom even in darkness. James drew Sarah's ring from his shirt, letting it catch the morning sun streaming through the courthouse windows. Every piece of evidence we gathered, every witness who came forward, every corrupt act exposed, it all happened because she was right about justice. Her death didn't silence the truth. It revealed it. The courthouse had filled as he spoke. Witnesses Morrison had threatened, families he'd destroyed, people whose lives he'd damaged, all there to see justice finally served. Jenny Miller, Samuel, Weber, Cooper, even Luke Hawkins under heavy guard. Each had brought their piece of the truth, drawn together by Sarah's legacy. Judge Richardson, James said formally, I'd like to enter one final piece of evidence. He drew out Sarah's last letter. My wife's own words, written the night before her execution, not about Morrison's crimes, but about the importance of fighting corruption with justice rather than vengeance, about making her death mean something by using it to protect others from false justice. Richardson accepted the letter gently. It will be added to the record. He turned to Morrison. Do you understand what you've done? Not just the murders, the corruption, the theft, but the damage to justice itself. Morrison's shoulders sagged, his arrogance finally broken. Get on with it. Make your ruling. Oh, I'm not ruling today. Richardson's voice was cold. This hearing was just to gather evidence. You'll be transported to the territorial capital for trial. Every case you've overseen will be reviewed. Every person you've wronged will have their chance at justice. Sarah Blackwood's death may have been your last act of judicial murder, but her legacy will be the complete exposure of your crimes. As Cooper's men led Morrison away in chains, James felt a weight lift from his chest. Sarah's ring seemed lighter. Somehow its burden transformed from grief to purpose. You were right, my love, he whispered. Justice prevails in the end. Not through violence or revenge, but through the patient blooming of truth, like moonflowers opening in darkness, showing the way home. The memorial stone stood at the heart of Promise Creek's town square, its polished surface catching the morning light. James ran his fingers over the carefully carved words, "In memory of Sarah Blackwood, beloved wife, healer, and seeker of truth. Her death exposed corruption, her life inspired justice. 1835, 1875, light blooms even in darkness." Around the stone, Sarah's beloved herbs now grew in a carefully tended garden. Yarrow and feverfew, sage and elderberry, healing plants that would serve the community for generations to come. Jenny Miller had organized the townspeople to maintain it, ensuring Sarah's garden would continue to offer comfort and cure, just as she had. The territorial court's official exoneration had come yesterday, clearing Sarah's name and acknowledging the terrible miscarriage of justice that had taken her life. But this simple stone, surrounded by the plants she'd loved, spoke more truth than any legal document could convey. The new town charter hung in the courthouse lobby, its fresh written amendments a testament to hard lessons learned. Judge Richardson himself had helped draft the changes, ensuring no single judge could ever again wield such unchecked power in Promise Creek. In memory of Sarah Blackwood, and to prevent future miscarriage of justice, all capital cases shall require independent review. No execution shall be scheduled without minimum 30 days for appeal. All judicial financial records shall be subject to public audit. A citizens' oversight committee shall review any allegations of judicial misconduct. Simple words that would save lives. Already, 3 other territories had adopted similar reforms, calling them Blackwood's Law. Sarah's death had exposed not just one corrupt judge, but the flaws in the system itself that had enabled his crimes. James touched the document gently. Here was Sarah's true memorial, not just justice served, but justice reformed. She would have liked that. At sunset, James stood beside the monument on the ranch's highest hill. The white marble caught the fading light like one of Sarah's beloved moonflowers. She rested here now, properly buried, with all the dignity Morrison had tried to deny her. The inscription told not just of her death, but of her life. Here lies Sarah Blackwood, who healed with medicine and kindness, who sought truth at any cost, who taught us that justice, like healing, requires both courage and compassion. Around the monument, Sarah's herbs grew wild and free, spreading healing across the landscape she'd loved. Moonflowers climbed the trellises James had built, ready to bloom as darkness fell. Every evening, they opened like stars coming home, reminding him of her words about light flowering in darkness. He touched her ring where it still hung around his neck. "You were right, my love," he whispered. "Justice did prevail, not through vengeance, but through truth. Not through violence, but through law. Your death brought life to real justice, and that's a legacy worthy of everything you believed in." As night fell softly over Promise Creek, the moonflowers opened one by one, their white petals glowing like Sarah's undimmed spirit, still lighting the way home.